Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Ken. That was really good. Now, we are here to talk about making sports broadcasting a more sustainable practice and the challenges that surround that. And this panel is a continuation of a discussion that was held at IBC in September, hosted by the Media Tech Sustainability Summit, which is run by Lisa Collins and Barbara Lange, where Broadcast Solutions, EVS, Cloudbase, and Media Monks discussed sustainability concerns related to OB trucks with comparisons to the power consumption and efficiencies of remote production centres. So I'm here today with EMG Group's Rohan and EVS's Alex and Steve from Cloudbase and Brian from IMG Studios to take this discussion further and see what we can find out. So first of all, to all of you, you're all doing excellent things in sustainability, which is why you're here on this panel. So can you give us just an example of one of the most significant things that you think you've done, one of your greatest achievements in sports broadcasting and sustainability?
Thanks, Heather. I think where EMG have come from, we've embedded ESG, and so if we talk about sustainability, that's not just environmental, but it's the social part of that. We've embedded that within our core business, and that's where we're thinking about it. So our future decisions, we're all thinking about how do we look, how sustainable can we be going forward. I think the other thing we've had is, since for 4 or 5 years, the impact of remote production and what's that's happened. We've seen today lots and lots of different sports. They've gone into remote now, and because the side effect of that is they have become more sustainable because there's a lot less travel. So that's I'd say it's only going forward where we can look at how we can drive these efficiencies.
Sure, yeah, and moving on, Alex?
I think we can talk about remote production or lower power consumption, higher channel densities, all those kind of things. For us at the moment, it's similar in a way. It's transparency in effect that we like you said, we embed it in the core business, but we're very open about what we want to achieve, and we're very we list all of our successes, all of our achievements. But I think with ESG in general and sustainability, for me at least, the successes we've had at the moment is in holding our hands up and saying, this is where we're at today, this is where we want to get to in the future, and it's going to be a journey to get there. And we don't maybe quite know how we're going to get there, but we're going on that journey.
Cool. And over to you, Steve.
I think one of the key things is no one's mentioned what sustainability is. Are we talking about carbon output? Are we talking about not reproducing kit, keeping kit going longer? Things like that. So I think we need to understand what sustainability is. But in terms of our contribution, and to your question of what we're particularly proud of, I think the move to HVO. So I got to a point with a particular bid for a major broadcaster where we were getting asked these questions repeatedly. So I was like, right, okay, let's find out where the carbon is on an OB. So I created a carbon calculator, and we did that. And the two main sources of carbon on OB are power generation and travel. And it was Sky that approached us because we have a unique kind of blend of doing power and facilities. They approached us for the move to HVO. So we were able to take Sky on a journey, and with our SPFL coverage, to use HVO for our power generation. We have a 15,000 litre Bowser at base that we use for road diesel as well. And we were doing this, a year or two before our competitors. We just didn't tell anyone about it. Unfortunately, we just got on with it. But I think that's, because of those are the two main things in terms of carbon in outside broadcast, to attack them first, I think is our first major achievement.
Cool. And Brian?
Yeah, I'm with Steve. I like to look at it from a practical point of view. Mm-hmm. And us going on to renewable power was probably the biggest thing that I think anybody can do. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the easiest things to do, but it comes at a cost. So I'm very proud of the fact that we are now on complete and renewable energy, because when I look at our power usage as a company, it's always going up in a good way, because we're winning more work, we're outputting more. So there's an element of, I feel like some ways that we should necessarily be congratulated for our power usage going up, because we're going up in a cleaner way than potentially where it would be being spent. So there's an element of trying to look at it slightly differently, as in the power usage that you use is actually, the more we use, the better, because we're not turning kit on for the fun of it. So we're turning on kit to do a particular job, to do a particular output, but if we're on renewable energy, then we're sort of on the right track from my point of view.
Sure, and then staying with you, Brian, and then anyone else wants to chip in, what are the major stumbling blocks you come across? We've got OB firms, we've got a software provider and a massive production company. So, well, production company, it's probably...
I don't think there are major stumbling blocks, but there are frustrations.
Right.
So a frustration from me is, when everybody steps up onto this panel, we want more for less. If you're serious about doing more, it's going to cost you more. So I actually want more for more. Right. So there's an element of, when tenders are put out, how much are people actually spending on sustainability? They're in a position there to necessarily say, we want 2% of the budget to be on sustainability. And then someone like us can turn around and say, well, the best use of that money is to do A, B, C, D. Mm-hmm. So there are factors that could help us all, because, I feel sorry for some of the suppliers who are in the room. When they're producing kit, like they have for decades, they've always tried to use less power because it costs more money. So they're doing their job. But I don't ever go to a supplier and say, oh, 1 second, I'm not going to use your kit because you're using 3% more power than you was last year. So they're never going to win that way. But there's an element of, if we just all put it in your budgets, it would be, and that's across the board. Everybody puts it into their own budgets, even your own personal budget. You might have to budget that you come here via the tube, and that's your time. So just budget more would be my sort of output.
Sure. Anyone else got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd just like to counter that. We are absolutely looking at power usage of individual bits of kit, mainly because we're on the road. So we're looking to go to outside broadcasting, to venues, and we're getting to a point now where we're not going to need power generation. We're going to take all the power with us, but we have to work with the manufacturers to get their power usage down so we can all get within that power budget that we've got on site, and we will be completely power generation free, which is particularly exciting.
I think one of the stumbling blocks we face as a manufacturer is the idea that we always, as an industry, very often we build things for the worst case scenario. So there's plenty of EVSs on trucks that are recording a beauty camera that probably never gets used in a production. And yet we're being asked to reduce our power consumption, and we're kind of saying, well, you could use one less channel, or you could, there's a stumbling block, which is the over-engineering that goes into a lot of broadcast systems, just in case. And I think that's something that we all need to consider, really, because it's not necessarily being driven by the truck vendors. It's actually coming from production more than anything else. I don't want to, throw anyone under the bus, but it feels like it's being driven by production, because it is that just in case. I might need that one shot. That's the shot that might win me the Emmy or the Oscar, or whatever the award. But at what point does that balance tip, and we say, hey, we can't do that anymore because we need to reduce our power consumption?
Sure.
And whether or not it's a stumbling block, I think that the general level of education and be able to talk about it. It's great that actually SVG have actually put sustainability in the title of this seminar. So I think, for it to be talked about more, and as we know, it's a journey that we're all working on, whether it's a facility supplier, whether it's production, whether it's the rights holder, we're all trying to become more efficient and become more sustainable. And there's definitely a level of knowledge sharing required.
Yeah.
That, that it should go across the industry, that we're happy to share best practice, what we're doing, because it's everyone's requirement has to think about sustainability going forward and embed it within their business.
Great. And then back to you, Brian. I mean, what do you see as your company's actual role in making live sport greener?
I'll be honest, it's not just my company, but there's an element of, I think the industry is responsible for actually getting the message out there more. I don't think we do enough of that. We're in a unique position. We could interview players and talent in front of electric chargers. I think, you wouldn't go to lawyers and have them on stage saying, well, you're running your Windows servers too much, because that's not their strength. Their strength in this battle, in this challenge, is to make the legal requirements easier. So I always feel like we're a television industry. We can amplify the message, and that would have a bigger change rather than getting technical people and saying, we're doing this already. But to get us on stage and not beat us up, but necessarily try and say you're using too much power, I just don't think the industry could do a lot more just by amplifying the message.
Okay. And Steve, I know you have thoughts on this.
Same thing. There is the elephant in the room that as facilities companies or production companies or broadcasters, we're looking to take people off site. And yet, if you speak to any of the sports federations, do they want to stop their fans travelling to the venue? Not at all. So why are we struggling to take 50, 100 people off site when there may be 40,000 people going to that Premier League match? Actually, we've got to solve these problems in a different way. Yes, absolutely, remote production has its place for other reasons, quality of life, travel, things like this. But I don't believe that it's the way to solve this problem. I'm absolutely on board with, we can use our industry in a different way to convey this message. I was very proud that when we did that first HVO Sky OB, they did a little VT piece that went, in the build-up to say they're on, pictures of our generators and things like this. So we can use our platform to actually change the message and do so much more good than just trying to take some people off site.
Cool. And then staying with you, Steve, what role, as an OB provider, MD, what do you see OB firms doing in conjunction with remote or centralised production to make live sports broadcasting a bit cleaner?
Why do remote or centralised production? It's ironic because I named the company, I named the project Cloudbase many years ago. That's got nothing to do with cloud-based production, and we're certainly not anti remote or cloud-based production, but I want to follow, I hate to use a political term, but follow the science. Actually, we're engineers. If you want us to solve this problem of actually carbon output or whatever, let's follow where the problem is. And as I say, it's power generation and it's travel to sites. Well, travel's getting solved at a society level. I've come down here in a Tesla. It's getting solved. And trucks on the road is going to get solved. It's going to happen because everything around us, everything has been brought on a lorry. So that's going to get solved. So why are we rushing to solve that? Let's use the right tools for the right outcome. Let's really, it goes back to my point at the start, what are we talking about when we talk about sustainability? Let's actually work out what it is we're trying to solve and then use the right tools to solve that.
Okay, and Rohan, to you, where do you see remote production and centralised going?
I've got a difference of opinion to Steve. We did some sums since 2022. We've done approximately 5,000 within the group, about 1,200 in the UK, and we're working with all of our high-level clients, and they've all done remote, and we see the benefits, the tangible benefits from that. I think what you need to do is be agile and look at, okay, how can we use technology to be more efficient? So whether that's simplified or cloud production, we've just today we've put out. So we've just invested in our first 19-ton fully electric truck, which will be a tender that will roll out next year. It's going to logistically it's going to be a challenge because we're going to have to try and make sure it's fully charged from base, and get to site, and then look at some renewable power to charge it there. So it's a challenge, but you have to look at that, and you see the by able to cut so many people travelling all over the globe is a positive effect. All of those flights that you're not using, all of the hotels, all of the catering, all of that is you are diminishing it. So I think you have to be you have to look at it and go, right, okay, how can we drive these efficiencies?
And sticking with you, you mentioned cloud. So where does cloud fit into this? Is this the solution? I mean, some of us aren't into the whole centralised remote. Where does that really stand? But
I think you have to look at everything going forward. So cloud, in some respects, we're still in the infancy for this. A fully decentralised production. Like we did some concepts, during COVID. We can see that's going to drive. We have just as an example. So Sky, their stat person who does all the cricket. It doesn't really travel to site anymore. He sits at home with a box with the fruit machine and does the stats there. So all of these things, you use technology to actually drive sustainability.
Great. Anyone else got thoughts on cloud and where that's fitting into things?
I think that obviously there's a big drive towards the cloud for bursting and sort of scalability, ad hoc scalability maybe. But we can't take away from the fact that as much as we talk even about 2110 and cloud, we are still a very CapEx-driven on-prem industry. That's whether it's in a truck or a broadcast centre, that is where we are at. And I think that when we link that into sustainability, how do we mitigate that when people still, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on what your opinion is, want to buy hardware? We're a hardware manufacturer as well as a software manufacturer, so it feeds us. How if they want to buy that hardware and run it, how do we enable them to do that in an efficient way? And obviously there's reduction in power consumption, but that's kind of finite. If people want and need to still use hardware, you need to draw power. So I think there's probably a responsibility on manufacturers to change the idea about the use of green power, like incentivize the use of green power perhaps, or something like that, where we know that we cannot reduce to zero, otherwise we wouldn't exist as a company.
Sure.
We have to sort of incentivize in different ways, give discounts or, I don't know, there's all sorts of things that we could do. We need to be prepared to do that as a manufacturer and as an industry. We need to be prepared to accept those kind of changes.
Yeah, and moving more into how this is being measured and what it's all about, Alex, who is the driving force in sustainability goals? Is it the EU? Is it the broadcasters? Is it you guys yourselves pushing yourselves? Where's it coming from?
All of the above. We're a European company, so I think it's from next year we'll be obliged to do the CSRD reporting. So it's the EU. We also want to supply people like EMG, so they will drive us and say, you have to have these certifications. And at the same time, there's certain things that are just good for us to have as a company. We have top employer status. And honestly, it really helps with talent attraction. Not quite sustainability, more into the wider ESG topic, but those are the things that we want as a company. So it's literally everyone, and at the same time, no one, I think. It's just about what is the best for your company. And obviously, it's a value chain as well. So above us are component suppliers. Below us are the people who buy our equipment on the stage. Below them are the production companies. Below them are the broadcasters. There's a whole value chain, basically. Yeah,
exactly. And supply chain is a really big thing now. And it's becoming with the incoming regulatory requirements that we've got. It's we have to measure. You have to start to measure. Even if your scope 3 is huge, it doesn't matter because it's the way that you can actually go forward and say, look, we need to invest. We need to work with with our supply chain that are looking into sustainability. You can't put your head in the sand anymore.
Yeah. And now this is a bit of a contentious one, but you've already pretty much answered this in some ways. Is what you're being measured on to reduce your carbon footprint correct, in your opinion? And if not, what do you think you should be being measured on? Go to Brian.
I'll be honest, I don't think it is. I think what you should be measured on is how much additional you are spending as a company on solving these problems. So if you look at the power, if we have to spend 20% more on power because we're using that supplier, that's the figure that's important to me. Because if you're going to look at how much power we're using, AI is going to come along and I'm now producing 15,000 highlights of a football match. That's more power I'm using as a building. Now, you put the spin onto it where all of a sudden that end user, rather than watching a 90-minute football game, is only watching a 3-minute highlight. We've saved power there, but we don't, that's your scope 3. So how far do you go? One of the things that always makes me laugh is that I'm positive that we can make a difference purely because we have quite a lot of car charging points at IMG, and the WhatsApp group and the community that comes across changing charging points and then necessarily saying, I've finished, I'm charged, you swap over. The amount of people who work together is amazing. And so when that starts as an industry, I think there's potential out there.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
Again, I think we need to be driven by the data and actually be honest where this power usage is coming from. If power is what we're talking about for sustainability, you know, we've got nothing against the cloud, but let's use it for the right reasons. When COVID hit, we still had to carry on with Springwatch. And so we got 30 producers and production people sat at home, which is brilliant, because we've got a truck without any production people in it, which makes it a lot easier. But anyway, so, you know, but let's be honest about where their power's coming from. They're heating their buildings. They're you know, providing power for their computers and solutions or whatever. Are we counting that? It goes back to the old CapEx, OpEx question. You know, are we counting everything in? And actually, in terms of power, and I know we had a pre-meeting and I brought this stat up, but I'd be very interested to know if anyone knows, as a country, how much we've reduced our carbon output since 1990. So we're all sat here talking about sustainability, and no one knows how much we've reduced our carbon output as a country since 1990. It's 48%. We've almost halved our carbon output as a country since 1990, mainly through changes in power generation. So this problem's getting solved. And I think, go back to your point, let's use our platform to spread the message and to influence society to keep on going.
I think the KPIs are interesting because they don't correlate between what our KPIs are, between what your KPIs are, between a broadcaster's KPIs. And even the measurements of success, you know, there are, I'm sure we'd all like to perhaps be SBTI certified in our objectives. There's all sorts of things. You know, the certifications that we've got don't match your certifications. I know that some of them do, but when we look on each other's websites, they don't match. And I think that's something that we need to address when it comes to measurements. Who has the final say in where you need to be certified? And I would say that as a okay, we're a relatively small company still, you know, medium-sized maybe, but quite small. It costs money, you know, to go through those certifications. It costs money, it costs time, it costs effort. And when you have to go through perhaps 2 or 3 or 4 a year to get those KPIs, and then to find out that those KPIs are only relevant because this broadcaster's requested them, if you want to supply to this broadcaster, you need this certification, which you need to measure these things. You go to a different broadcaster, it's these. And often to gain higher ratings within those KPIs, because I said it's a value chain, it's about who we can attract below us and above us in the chain to also be certified in the same way.
Pyramid selling stuff.
I'll try and say no, but to a certain extent, yes. You know, where we can achieve silver, if we want to achieve gold, some of our suppliers also have to be certified. And when our suppliers might be, you know, someone like Intel or Nvidia or something, and you're like, excuse me, could you get certified by so-and-so? And they're like, no. It becomes very difficult to gain some of those higher certifications, and the list of KPIs that we need to achieve just grows and grows and grows and grows and grows and grows.
So the governing bodies handing out these KPIs and this certification and hoops of fire to jump through, they aren't necessarily always being helpful?
I wouldn't say they're not being helpful. I think everything is useful, and everything is it gives you a positive step in the right direction. It's just they're not aligned. You know, and what you need for this certification for broadcaster A is not quite the same as what you need for this certification for broadcaster B. And I think that's where, at the lowest level or the topmost level, depending on how you look at it, the people who are doing the influencing the most are probably the broadcasters, because they are the ones that are commissioning the content, that will use our equipment, these guys' services. The alignment there would be helpful probably to all of us on the stage, is what I could say.
Sure. And then another slightly contentious one, how large is the issue of greenwashing and virtue signalling within all of these sustainability goals? We've had it in diversity, where you get a lot of box ticking according to who's been employed, not according to how high they get up in the company or anything like that. So what's the situation from your experiences?
I think it depends on how cynical you are. There's an element of everybody will boast about what they're doing well. Now, someone comes along and says, well, they're greenwashing. I don't know if they're going out of their way to necessarily lie, so I don't think but they're just trying to put the best show on. So it's a tough one for me to necessarily say it's massively out there, but everything Alex was saying earlier, I agree. No one's really working together. No one's really... The bodies you talk to, if I get one award with one body, it should automatically mean I get the same award or equivalent with another body. But until I see these bodies working together, it's going to necessarily... I'm not sure how their own agenda is opposite to someone else's. And, you know, it's like when you talk about the cloud. I go to sustainability events with AWS, with Google. Why don't they all put on one sustainability event and work together? I don't see any of the big players working together. So that's where I think greenwashing's probably a bit strong for me, but whether they're all aligned on the same goal is another argument.
Sure. Anyone else got thoughts on that one?
I think, you know, you talk about greenwashing. What we're trying to do is just work with our supply chain. So, you know, it's regularly meeting with our clients, discussing about ESG, about what we're trying to do, reaching out to our suppliers, and to be fair, it's an education piece again, because not everyone is across this field and what's needed to be done. So it's about raising the level of people's education and understanding about this subject, and then everyone can have a better idea of how they're going to achieve and how they're going to drive their efficiencies.
Sure. Okay, and then last one for you, just summing up in one line, which I think might be hard for Steve, but what do you actually think the focus should be on increasing sustainability in live sports production? Brian?
I'd go budget more.
Cool.
If you're serious about it, budget more.
Mm-hmm. Steve?
Follow the data.
Short and sweet. Alex?
Align on the KPIs.
This is very good. We've never had actual one-liners.
And I'd say collaborate.
Well, yeah, one word. Cool. Well done, guys. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. Please give them a round of applause.